My stepfather Grant and Marla stole the grant I secured with my dad's foundation and handed it to Owen. Then they tried taking my godmother's estate too. I evicted them all, and watching them scramble out was the best thing I've ever seen. The heater clicked and whirred as we sat around the battered metal kitchen table, the window frosting over from the Alaskan cold. Marla poured herself another cup of tea, smiling wide like she owned the world. To Owen, she said, raising her mug like it was a champagne glass. Brilliant, dedicated, selfless. He's going to change the world. My name is Talia Rowe, and I'm 28 years old, working at the Northwind Research Outpost, tucked away in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. The kind of place people only hear about when a plane goes missing. Grant, my stepfather, or maybe just the man who married my mother's replacement, clinked mugs with Marla, his cheeks red from the heater and pride. And Patagonia, he beamed. We'll get you there before the summer season's over. That grant money will stretch if we're smart about it. I paused mid-bite, the plastic fork frozen halfway to my mouth. Grant's words lodged in my brain like a splinter. That grant money. My grant. The one I secured years ago, back when the Northwind Outpost was just a dream fueled by my late father's foundation. I set my fork down, my heart beginning to hammer. Wait, I said carefully, what grant are you talking about? Marla didn't miss a beat. She smiled sweetly, the way you do when you're about to gut someone and still want to look like the good guy. The Rowe Foundation grant, she said. Your father's legacy. We thought it made the most sense to reallocate it. Owen's work has so much public impact, you know? Reallocate. I stared at her, not quite able to breathe. You took my funding, I said, voice low. Marla gave a delicate shrug. Talia, come on. It's not personal. This is a team effort. Sometimes, we all have to make sacrifices. Grant leaned back in his chair, nodding like a wise old sage. Owen's research into glacier recession could land national headlines. Bring in real attention. You'll still be part of the team, of course. Supporting roles are crucial too. Supporting role. In the project I designed. With the money I fought for. Using the name of the father they had buried and repurposed. My chest tightened, a heat blooming behind my eyes that I fought to keep in check. You had no right, I said, my voice trembling despite how hard I clenched my fists under the table. Marla smiled wider, almost pitying. Talia, sweetie. It's just science. It's not about ownership. It's about impact. I shoved back from the table, the chair scraping loud against the tile. Both their faces blurred for a second through my fury. You're right, I said tightly. It's not about ownership. I grabbed my coat off the rack, heart pounding in my ears. It's about respect, I finished, yanking open the heavy door and stepping into the howling night. Behind me, the kitchen door banged shut. Their voices, their laughter, faded into the blizzard. The snow swallowed me whole the second I stepped off the porch. Wind whipped across the outpost like a living thing, yanking at my coat, stinging my cheeks raw. I didn't even grab gloves. Didn't even think. I just walked, boots crunching hard against the frozen ground. I should have turned back. Should have packed properly. But the anger in my chest burned hot enough to keep me moving. The only place close enough to reach without freezing to death was Nia's cabin, about half a mile east through the woods. She was a postdoc, tough as hell, the kind of woman who knew how to patch up a snowmobile engine and brew coffee strong enough to fuel a whole outpost. The lights from her place glowed faintly through the trees like a lighthouse in a storm. I barely made it up the stairs before the door yanked open, and there she was, Nia Harris, messy bun, flannel pajamas, mug of tea in hand. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Jesus, Tal, she said, stepping aside instantly. Get in here before you freeze your face off. I stumbled inside, kicking snow off my boots. The warmth hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. Nia didn't ask any questions. She just took my coat, shoved a steaming mug into my hands, and threw a thick blanket over my shoulders. We sat in the tiny living room, her battered wood stove popping in the corner, while I thawed out slowly. Minutes passed in silence. The kind of silence only someone who really knows you can offer. Finally, when my hand stopped shaking, I told her everything. They took it, I said. The grant. My grant. Marla gave it to Owen. Nia's eyebrows shot up, but she didn't interrupt. And when I called them out, I continued, my throat tightening, they said it was for the greater good. that Owen's work had more public value. The words still tasted sour. Nia sat back, her fingers drumming lightly on her mug. So basically, she said slowly, they're stealing your future and calling it teamwork. I gave a short, broken laugh. Yeah. That about sums it up. She shook her head, dark eyes flashing. You can't let them do this, Talia. You worked your ass off for that funding. You built that project from the ground up. I shrugged miserably. They don't care. They will when you hit back, she said fiercely. Lawyer up. Get a formal review started. You have emails, right? Proof? Some, I said. But they're slippery. They'll say it's all about resource optimization or whatever garbage term they cooked up. Nia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, urgent tone. You're not alone. I'll help you fight them. Hell, half the team would if they knew what was going on. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with Owen's name. Nia frowned. You gonna answer? I hesitated, then thumbed it open. Text from Owen. Didn't ask for this. Just want peace. I stared at the words for a long moment. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, cold and certain. Then I typed back. Then give it back. Simple. Clean. No begging. No explaining. I shoved the phone into the couch cushions and leaned back, feeling a small, grim satisfaction settle in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't backing down. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Owen or anyone from the outpost. It was a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice, calm and professional, filled my ear. Miss Rowe? This is Carol Sutter, attorney for the estate of Professor Meredith Clark. I'm sorry to inform you that Professor Clark passed away earlier this week. She named you as the sole beneficiary. We need to set up a meeting. I didn't respond right away. My brain just froze. Meredith was dead? It didn't feel real. Meredith Clark, my godmother, my mentor, the only person besides my father who had ever really believed in me, gone. I hung up the call in a daze. Nia sat across the room, looking up from her laptop. You okay? She asked, brow furrowing. Meredith, I croaked. She's gone. Nia came over immediately, sitting beside me, her hand warm on my back. The funeral was held 2 days later, in a tiny hilltop church outside Fairbanks. It snowed the whole drive up, the sky heavy and low like it was morning too. I stood at the back of the church, numb, as the service dragged on. I couldn't focus on the hymns or the eulogies. My mind kept drifting back to all the long afternoons Meredith and I had spent in her cluttered office, surrounded by dusty climate models and old maps, dreaming up ways to make the world better. Afterward, people gathered outside, their breath fogging the air. I kept to the edges, not ready to talk, not ready to say goodbye. That's when I heard it, Marla's voice, cutting through the murmuring crowd. Once we secure the villa, Owen can finally set up a proper research base, she was saying, smiling that same thin, brittle smile she always wore at conferences. Meredith wouldn't have wanted it to sit unused. My stomach twisted. The villa. Meredith's research estate, the one tucked deep in the forest near Denali National Park, complete with labs, climate data archives, and the best-preserved glacier field models in the Northern Hemisphere. I edged closer, just enough to hear better. Grant chuckled, clapping Owen on the back. We'll make it official soon. Shouldn't be any issues transferring ownership. They were already planning to gut Meredith's legacy for their own purposes. Already counting on it. Already assuming I would stay silent. I clenched my jaw and walked away before I said something that would get me arrested at a funeral. Later that afternoon, I met Carol Sutter at her office, a small space above a bookstore smelling faintly of paper and old coffee. She was polite but brisk, sliding a thick folder across the desk toward me. Professor Clark left very specific instructions, Carol said, adjusting her glasses. She named you sole heir to her estate, including the villa, the research archives, and all affiliated intellectual property. I stared at the folder. You're sure? I managed. Carol smiled gently. Positive. She also included a letter for you. With careful hands, I unfolded the single sheet of thick stationery. Talia. You are the future I always believed in. Protect what we built. Don't let them steal it. Love. M. Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them back fiercely. I pressed my palms against the desk, steadying myself, as something solid clicked into place inside me. They thought they could steal from me again. They thought wrong. I tucked the letter carefully back into the folder and met Carol's eyes. "I'm ready," I said. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I meant it. The call came the next morning while I was packing a duffel bag with essentials to move into the villa. Caller ID, Marla Rowe. I let it buzz once, twice. Then, against my better judgment, I picked up. "Talia." Marla said, her voice overly bright, like she was hosting a cooking show. "I thought we should have a little chat. Clear the air, you know. It's been such an emotional week for everyone." I stayed silent, waiting. She pressed on. "I hear you're handling Meredith's estate now. That's wonderful." "Really? We were actually thinking, maybe it's time to coordinate, figure out how to best manage the resources going forward." I could picture her perfectly, smiling, hair pulled into a neat bun, tapping her nails against her coffee mug while she plotted my erasure. I sat down on the edge of the bed, cradling the phone against my shoulder. "You mean take it over," I said flatly. Marla gave a breathy little laugh, the kind people use when they think you're being so dramatic. "No, no. Of course not. We just want to ensure Owen's research gets the proper support. Meredith would have wanted that." I shifted the phone to my other ear. "Marla," I said, calm and sharp as the edge of a blade. "Meredith left everything to me. Not to the foundation. Not to the team. Not to Owen. To me." There was a long pause on the line. I could almost hear her recalculating. Then her voice dropped, cooler. "Talia, you can't seriously be thinking of keeping it all for yourself. That estate was meant for progress, for the greater good. You're being selfish." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Funny," I said. "You didn't think it was selfish when you stole my grant money." Another beat of silence. Then Grant's voice chimed in from somewhere near the phone, all gravel and fake authority. "You better think carefully about your next steps, young lady," he said. "These things can get messy. Legally speaking." I almost laughed. Grant Rowe. Quoting half-baked legal threats like he thought it would scare me. I reached over to the nightstand, pulled the thick file Carol had given me, and thumbed through the pages. "Don't worry," I said smoothly. "I already consulted a lawyer. Everything is in writing. Witnessed. Signed. Recorded." I let that sink in. "If you want to use the villa," I continued, "you're welcome to apply like any other academic institution. Standard rental rates apply. Utilities not included." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I could almost see Marla's face, tight, furious, stunned. "You can't do this," she finally hissed. "I already did." Another long pause. Then she hung up. I stared at the dead screen for a second, the reality of it washing over me. It wasn't just a technical victory. It was a boundary. A line in the ice they couldn't cross without consequences. They'd built their careers on being untouchable. But now? Now the ground was mine. I gave them a grace period. 60 days. That was more than generous. Enough time to submit a rental application, negotiate terms, or, preferably, move on. Of course, that's not what happened. Instead, they showed up at the villa a week later with a caravan of equipment, interns, and enough passive-aggressive energy to freeze the pipes. Marla breezed through the front doors without knocking, Grant and Owen trailing behind her like bad weather. "We'll be setting up in the West Wing," she said casually, as if we had made some prior agreement. "The labs there need minimal retrofitting." I folded my arms, blocking the hallway. "You're not tenants yet," I said, voice even. "You haven't signed anything." Marla's smile didn't even flicker. "Oh, we'll sort all that out soon. Meanwhile, it's important not to let valuable research time slip away." And just like that, they moved in. At first, I thought maybe, they would settle down and realize they couldn't push me around anymore. Instead, the sabotage started. It was subtle at first. Sample labels mysteriously disappeared from my climate models. Passwords for the main database were changed without notice. Critical equipment I had personally maintained for years suddenly went missing or broken beyond repair. I kept records of everything, dated photographs, emails, copies of incident reports, but I didn't confront them. Not yet. I refused to give them the fight they wanted. Instead, I rebuilt quietly, slowly moving my most important data onto a separate server they didn't know about. I rerouted access points. I ordered backup supplies under my name only. Every time they tried to erase me, I just became harder to kill. One afternoon, I found my data station had been wiped clean, samples mislabeled, entire temperature logs deleted. I stood there, staring at the blinking cursor, my throat tight, my hands shaking. Behind me, Marla appeared, arms folded, watching me like she was admiring her handiwork. "You know," she said sweetly, "this isn't healthy. Holding on to grudges. Maybe it's time to let go of the past." I turned slowly to face her, the cold settling deep into my bones. "You taught me something," I said softly. "You taught me to fight for what's mine." Her smile flickered. "Good." I let the silence stretch between us until she finally turned and walked away, heels clicking down the hallway. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table in the empty villa, drinking coffee that had long since gone cold. The place was quiet except for the creak of the old floorboards and the occasional howl of wind against the glass. The weight of everything pressed down hard, the betrayal, the isolation, the endless battle I never asked for but couldn't walk away from now. Part of me wanted to scream. Part of me wanted to cry. But mostly, I just felt tired. Still, deep under the exhaustion, something stubborn burned. They thought they could wear me down, bury me under inconvenience and humiliation. They didn't realize that everything they took from me only made me dig my heels in deeper. This was my inheritance. This was my life's work. And no matter how many passwords they changed or samples they ruined, they couldn't take that from me. Not unless I let them. And I wasn't about to let them. Not now. Not ever. It happened on a Wednesday night. I was in the main lab alone, trying to salvage what was left of my most recent samples, when the door creaked open behind me. I didn't even look up. I was too tired to deal with another passive-aggressive inspection from Marla or Grant. But then I heard his voice. "Talia?" I turned. Owen stood there, half in the doorway, looking about as uncomfortable as a kid caught sneaking out past curfew. He was still wearing his lab coat, hair a mess, shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of the whole outpost on his back. I straightened slowly, crossing my arms. "What do you want?" I asked, sharper than I intended. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I wanted to say I'm sorry." I blinked, caught off guard. Of all the things I expected, an apology wasn't one of them. He moved closer, hands shoved into his pockets. "I didn't know, at first. About the grant. About the estate. I thought, I don't know, that everything was already arranged. I didn't realize they were taking it from you." I leaned back against the lab table, my heart hammering a little harder now. "And when you did realize?" I asked. He winced. "I didn't do anything," he admitted. "I told myself it wasn't my place. That it wasn't my fault." I laughed, bitter and short. "It's easier that way, isn't it?" I said. "Tell yourself you're just along for the ride. Pretend you're not standing on someone else's shoulders." He flinched, but he didn't look away. "You're right," he said quietly. "I didn't want to see it. And I'm sorry." The sincerity in his voice made something in my chest twist, not forgiveness, not yet, but something less hard, less cold. Owen took a step closer. "If you want me gone," he said, voice low, "I'll pack my things. I'll leave tonight." I stared at him, really stared, at the guilt written all over his face, the awkwardness, the sadness. He wasn't like Marla. He wasn't playing a long con. He was just a kid caught in a current bigger than he knew how to swim. I shook my head slowly. "I don't need you to disappear, Owen," I said. "I need you to choose." He looked up, frowning. "You can stay," I said, my voice steady. "You can keep doing good work. But if you stay on my terms. Not Marla's. Not Grant's. Mine." Silence stretched between us. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I'll earn my place," he said. "The right way." I didn't smile. I wasn't ready for that. But I held out my hand anyway. He took it, his grip firm but nervous, like he knew how fragile this new bridge between us really was. And for the first time in months, I allowed a small breath of hope to slip through the cracks in my armor. Maybe not everyone in this mess was beyond saving. The first of the month came cold and clear. A thin crust of snow covered the villa's roof, glittering under the pale morning sun. Inside, the place was silent except for the faint hum of the heating system. I sat at the dining table, watching the clock tick over to 9 a.m. Rent was due. They knew it. They just thought I wouldn't do anything. But they didn't understand me at all. At 9:05, I stood, grabbed the thick manila envelopes I had prepared the night before, and made my way down the long hall toward the West Wing, Marla's self-declared command center. I knocked once, hard. Inside, muffled voices stopped mid-conversation. The door swung open to reveal Marla, lips pursed in irritation, Grant looming behind her. "Talia," she said coolly, folding her arms. "If you're here to talk about payment, we're still reviewing our options." I held out the envelope. "This isn't a conversation," I said. "It's your formal eviction notice. You have 7 days to vacate." Marla's face went pale, then flushed bright red. "You can't evict us," she snapped. "We're a recognized research entity." "Not here, you're not," I said, voice calm. "Not without a lease. Not without payment." Grant stepped forward, trying to loom the way he always did when he wanted to intimidate. "You're making a big mistake," he said, his voice low and threatening. "You don't understand how much we've done for you." I laughed softly. I couldn't help it. "Let's talk about what you've done," I said, my voice cold and razor-sharp. "You stole my funding. You erased my work. You sabotaged my lab. You tried to erase me from my own father's foundation." Marla opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the chance. "You didn't make me," I continued. "You used me. And now you're being held accountable. That's not cruelty. That's consequences." Grant's face twisted in fury, but Marla grabbed his arm, stopping him. "Talia," she said through gritted teeth, "this isn't how family treats family." That word, family, made something snap inside me. I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "You were never my family. You were just the first ones to teach me how betrayal works." Marla's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. "Good." I turned and walked away without another word, leaving them standing there, clutching their crumbling kingdom. They left the next afternoon. No goodbyes. No apologies. Just the sound of slamming doors and boxes being shoved hastily into trucks. As they pulled away down the long, icy driveway, I stood at the window of the main villa, a mug of coffee in my hand, watching until their convoy disappeared into the trees. They looked smaller from up here. Weaker. Exactly as they had always been underneath the performance. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel powerless. I didn't feel like the overlooked girl in the back of the room. I felt like someone who had taken her life back. And no matter how lonely it might get, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't giving it up again. The villa was quiet now. No shouting from the West Wing. No passive-aggressive meetings scheduled behind my back. No sudden, mysterious malfunctions. Just me and the sound of the wind slipping under the eaves, the occasional creak of the old wood settling into the silence. At first, I thought I'd feel victorious. Triumphant. Instead, I just felt hollow. I wandered through the main hall that first evening, touching the old stone walls with my fingertips, running my hand over the polished banisters. Every room felt too big. Every hallway too long. I had won. I had stood my ground. And somehow, it still didn't feel the way I thought it would. I curled up on the couch with a blanket, scrolling mindlessly through my phone to fill the silence. Eventually, without even really meaning to, I found myself on an academic forum I used to read during grad school, a place where researchers vented about grants, peer-reviewed disasters, departmental infighting. A post caught my eye. "Ever protect yourself and still feel guilty afterward?" Without thinking too hard, I typed a reply. Anonymously, of course. I cut off people who tried to erase me. I fought for my work, for myself. I should feel proud. But mostly I feel alone. I hovered for a second, then hit post. The replies flooded in faster than I expected. Some were supportive. You chose yourself. That's never wrong. They made their choices. You made yours. Others were judgmental. Family is family, no matter what. You should have found a compromise. Sounds like you're bitter, not brave. I read them all, my emotions ricocheting between defensiveness, sadness, anger, and exhaustion. Finally, buried near the bottom, I found a simple reply. No username. No flair. Just words. Sometimes peace feels like loneliness at first. But it's still peace. I stared at that reply for a long time. Long enough that the screen dimmed and I had to tap it back awake. There was nothing flashy about the words. Nothing triumphant. Just a quiet kind of truth. I set the phone down and pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders, closing my eyes against the weight pressing at the edges of my chest. Maybe this was peace. Maybe peace wasn't fireworks and champagne and ticker tape parades. Maybe it was sitting alone in a drafty old house, heartsore and battered, but finally, my own. The silence didn't feel quite so empty after that. It wasn't the absence of love. It was the absence of fear. It would take time, I knew. Time to stop looking over my shoulder. Time to trust that what I built was mine now, not a temporary loan waiting to be snatched away. But for the first time since my father died, I wasn't chasing anyone's approval. I wasn't begging to be seen. I was standing still, standing firm, in a place that belonged to me, not because someone handed it over as a favor, but because I had claimed it and defended it and refused to be erased. And in the quiet that stretched out before me, cold and clean and terrifying and beautiful, I realized something. I wasn't alone anymore. I had myself. And for now, that was enough.